I never imagined that after spending 25 years helping raise a little boy into the man he became, I would be treated like a stranger on the happiest day of his life. The wedding invitation arrived in a thick cream-colored envelope with my name written carefully across the front. Inside was a handwritten note from my stepson thanking me for always being there for him. He wrote that he couldn't imagine reaching this moment without my love and support. I read those words over and over, believing they came straight from his heart. They reminded me that every sacrifice I had made over the years had meant something. I met his father when my stepson was only 6 years old. His biological mother had already walked away from the family, leaving behind a confused little boy who couldn't understand why she never came back. From the beginning, I promised myself I would never try to replace anyone. I simply wanted to be another person he could depend on. Trust isn't built overnight, especially with a child carrying that kind of heartbreak. It took patience, kindness, and countless ordinary moments before he finally reached for my hand without hesitation. Those ordinary moments became the foundation of our family. I helped him learn to ride a bicycle after dozens of scraped knees. I stayed awake beside his bed through fevers that lasted all night. I attended every parent-teacher meeting, every school play, every soccer game, and every graduation ceremony. Whenever he doubted himself, I reminded him that he was capable of far more than he believed. When he celebrated victories, I celebrated beside him. When life disappointed him, I was the shoulder he leaned on. As the years passed, the word stepmother slowly disappeared from our daily lives. He introduced me simply as his mom to friends who didn't know our family history. I never asked him to do that. He chose those words himself, and each time he said them, I felt grateful beyond measure. They weren't just a title. They were proof that love could grow stronger than blood. Then tragedy struck when my husband passed away after a brief illness. Losing him shattered both of us. During those difficult months, I secretly feared that without his father connecting us, my relationship with my stepson would slowly fade away. Instead, he surprised me. He called often, invited me to family dinners, and assured me that nothing would change between us. He told me I would always be part of his family because family was built through love, not biology. Hearing those words gave me comfort when I needed it most. A few years later, he called with exciting news. He had proposed to the woman he loved, and she had said yes. I could hear the happiness in his voice as he talked about their future together. Before ending the call, he asked if I would come to the wedding. He said it wouldn't feel complete if I wasn't there. My eyes filled with tears before I could even answer. I told him I wouldn't miss it for anything. I wanted everything to be perfect. I spent weeks searching for a dress that was elegant without drawing attention away from the bride. I found a meaningful wedding gift that symbolized lasting commitment, along with a heartfelt card wishing them a lifetime of patience, respect, and unconditional love. Every decision came from genuine excitement because I believed I was about to witness another milestone in the life of the boy I had helped raise. When the wedding day finally arrived, the venue looked beautiful. Fresh flowers lined the entrance, soft music drifted through the air, and guests greeted one another with smiles. I recognized many familiar faces who warmly welcomed me. Several relatives thanked me for coming and asked how I had been doing. Everything felt exactly as I had imagined. I caught a glimpse of the bride from across the room. She looked stunning, though she seemed distant whenever our eyes briefly met. I assumed she was overwhelmed by the stress of such an important day. Weddings can be emotional for everyone involved, so I thought nothing of it. As guests began finding their assigned seats for the reception, I handed my invitation to one of the ushers. He studied the seating chart for several seconds before his expression changed. His smile disappeared, replaced by visible confusion. He checked the list again, then looked back at me as though hoping he had made a mistake. Finally, he cleared his throat and quietly asked me to follow him. Instead of leading me into the reception hall where family members were gathering, he walked past the decorated tables, through a side doorway, and stopped in a narrow hallway outside the room. Sitting alone against the wall was a single chair with a small place, setting balanced on a folding table. Certain there had been some misunderstanding, I gently told him there must be an error because I was the groom's mother. The usher lowered his eyes before speaking softly. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. These were the seating instructions we were given by the bride. For a moment, I couldn't process what I had just heard. I looked past the usher into the reception hall where laughter echoed and guests settled into beautifully decorated tables. Then I looked back at the lonely chair in the hallway. It wasn't a mistake. Someone had deliberately decided that this was where I belonged. I calmly asked if my stepson was available. I didn't want to make assumptions before hearing the truth from him. The usher hesitated, then stepped away to pass along my request. Before he returned, the bride approached instead. She wore a pleasant smile, but it never reached her eyes. "I heard there was some confusion," she said. I explained that I had been directed to a seat outside the reception and believed there had been an error. She shook her head without the slightest sign of concern. "No," she replied. "Everything is exactly as planned." Her answer caught me completely off guard. She continued speaking in a calm voice, almost as if she were discussing the weather. "We wanted immediate family inside the main reception area. This arrangement makes more sense." I stared at her, trying to understand what she meant. "I am his family," I said quietly. She folded her hands and answered, "Legally, maybe once. But you're not his real mother, and some guests wouldn't understand the relationship. We wanted to avoid unnecessary questions." Her words landed harder than I expected. I glanced through the open doors and immediately noticed relatives I barely recognized sitting at tables close to the bride and groom. People who had rarely been part of his life had better seats than the woman who had raised him. A few nearby guests had begun paying attention. Some exchanged uncomfortable looks. Others quickly turned away, pretending they hadn't heard the conversation. No one stepped forward. The bride simply smiled again. "I hope you understand. Today is about appearances as much as anything else." That sentence told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about seating. It was about erasing my place in the family. I looked down at the carefully wrapped wedding gift in my hands. Just hours earlier, I had imagined giving it to them with pride. Now it felt strangely heavy. For a brief moment, I considered walking into the reception anyway. I could have confronted her in front of everyone. I could have demanded that my stepson explain what was happening. But I realized that creating a public argument would only turn his wedding into a spectacle. Whether he knew about this decision or not, I refused to become the center of a scene. Some forms of dignity are protected by walking away. Without another word, I placed the gift and the handwritten card on a nearby table. I wished them happiness in my heart, even though mine had just been shattered. Then I turned toward the exit. Each step felt heavier than the last. Behind me, the music grew louder as the reception officially began. Ahead of me was silence. By the time I reached my car, I could no longer hold back the tears. I sat behind the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing before driving away. 25 years of memories replayed through my mind, each one making it harder to believe that this was how our story had ended. What I didn't know was that several guests had witnessed everything. They had seen where I had been seated. They had heard enough of the conversation to understand exactly what had happened. As I drove home believing I had quietly disappeared from the celebration, one longtime family friend was already searching for my stepson. Within minutes, he learned that I had never been seated with the family at all. My stepson had been greeting relatives and thanking guests for attending when an old family friend quietly pulled him aside. At first, he smiled, assuming someone simply needed his attention. That smile disappeared the moment he heard my name. The man asked why I had been seated alone outside the reception hall. My stepson frowned in confusion. "What are you talking about?" he asked. The family friend explained exactly what he had seen. He described the hallway chair, the brief conversation with the bride, and the moment I walked out carrying nothing except my disappointment. He even mentioned that I had left the wedding gift behind before quietly leaving without causing a scene. My stepson immediately looked toward the family tables. I wasn't there. He searched the room again, hoping he had somehow missed me. Then he spotted the unopened gift sitting exactly where I had left it. Without another word, he walked straight to his bride. He asked one simple question. "Where is my mother?" She answered without hesitation. I moved her seat. His expression hardened. "You did what?" She remained remarkably calm. I didn't think she belonged at the family table. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then he asked the question that mattered most. Did you tell anyone you were changing the seating plan? She slowly shook her head. I handled it myself because I knew you'd overreact. Those words shattered whatever patience he still had. You made that decision without telling me? I was protecting the image of our wedding, she replied. People expect to see real family sitting together. I didn't want guests asking awkward questions. He stared at her as though he no longer recognized the woman standing in front of him. The woman you sent into the hallway is the person who raised me, he said. She stayed when everyone else left. She cared for me when I was sick, celebrated every achievement, and stood beside me after my father died. If that's not family, then I don't know what family means. Their conversation was no longer private. Nearby relatives stopped talking as voices grew louder. The bride's parents quickly stepped in, insisting that their daughter had done nothing wrong. They argued that the wedding belonged to the couple and that seating arrangements were ultimately their choice. Several members of my late husband's family strongly disagreed. One elderly aunt spoke with tears in her eyes. That woman devoted half her life to this family. She earned her place at the front long ago. The room divided almost instantly. Some defended the bride. Most defended me. As emotions rose, the bride finally admitted something she had kept hidden for months. She confessed that she had never been comfortable with how close my stepson and I were. She believed he relied on me too much and thought it was time for him to leave the past behind. She also admitted she disliked introducing me as his mother because, in her words, people would never understand. Hearing those words forced my stepson to remember dozens of small moments he had ignored. The subtle comments encouraging him to visit me less often. The excuses for excluding me from family dinners. The criticism whenever he spoke about me with affection. He had dismissed every incident as stress or misunderstanding. Now they all formed a pattern he could no longer ignore. The celebration around them slowly came to a standstill. The music continued playing, but almost no one paid attention. Conversations faded. Guests watched quietly as the bride and groom stood on opposite sides of an argument that had become far bigger than a seating chart. My stepson reached into his pocket, took out his phone, and called me. The call went unanswered. He tried again. Straight to voicemail. At that very moment, I was sitting alone in my living room, convinced that leaving had closed the final chapter of our family forever. I opened an old photo album, removed a picture of the three of us together, and whispered goodbye to the life I thought I still had. Just as I reached to close the album, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, I considered ignoring the doorbell altogether. My emotions were still raw, and I had no desire to speak to anyone. But when the bell rang a second time, I slowly walked to the door and opened it. My stepson was standing there, still wearing his wedding suit. His eyes were red, and before I could say a single word, he wrapped his arms around me. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. I didn't know. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The silence said more than words ever could. When we finally stepped inside, he looked around the house that had been his home for so many years. His eyes landed on the old family photo album, lying open on the table. "You thought I chose this," he said quietly. I didn't answer. From where I stood, it had certainly looked that way. He took a deep breath before explaining everything. He told me he had never seen the final seating chart and had trusted the wedding arrangements were being handled honestly. He only learned the truth after a family friend told him where I had been placed. By the time he realized what had happened, I was already gone. He admitted he had confronted his bride in front of both families. When she refused to apologize and insisted she had done the right thing, something inside him changed. He said the issue was never about a chair or a table. It was about respect, he told me. If someone can humiliate the woman who raised me without feeling any remorse, then they're showing me exactly how they handle people they don't value. He confessed that, looking back, there had been warning signs throughout their engagement. She often questioned why we remained so close. She discouraged him from visiting me as often. She suggested that once they were married, his priorities should change completely. He had convinced himself those disagreements were normal because every couple had differences. The wedding forced him to see those moments differently. He realized they weren't isolated disagreements. They reflected a deeper belief that relationships could be measured by blood instead of loyalty, sacrifice, and love. I ignored too much, he admitted. Today made me realize that staying silent would make me just as responsible. He told me the reception had ended early. Many guests had left after witnessing the argument. Some relatives tried to repair the situation, but the damage had already been done. Trust had been broken in front of everyone who mattered. His bride still believed she had protected the image of the wedding. Instead, she had revealed the truth about her character. I listened without interrupting. Anger had already left me. What remained was sadness for everyone involved. After he finished speaking, I reached across the table and took his hand. "I never wanted you to choose between us," I said. "The people who truly love you should never force that decision." He lowered his head. "I know," he replied. "That's why I came here instead of pretending everything was fine." I reminded him that forgiveness didn't mean accepting disrespect. It meant refusing to let bitterness control the future. Whatever decision he made about his marriage had to be based on honesty, mutual respect, and the kind of values that could survive difficult moments. He nodded. For the first time that day, the weight on his shoulders seemed a little lighter. Over the following months, our relationship grew even stronger. We spent more time together than we had in years, not because of obligation, but because neither of us wanted fear or misunderstandings to create distance again. Whenever people asked about me, he introduced me with complete confidence. "This is my mother." He never paused to explain biology, legal definitions, or family history. The title belonged to the woman who had loved him every day of his life, and he was no longer willing to let anyone take that away. Looking back, I realized the most painful moment of my life had also revealed the strongest truth. Walking away from that hallway wasn't an act of surrender. It was an act of self-respect. If I had accepted being treated as less than family, I would have silently agreed with the lie that love could be erased by someone else's opinion. Instead, that single decision exposed every hidden truth. It revealed who valued appearances over character, who remained loyal when it mattered most, and what real family actually means. I arrived at that wedding believing I was about to witness the beginning of someone else's new life. I left believing I had lost my own family forever. I was wrong. The moment I refused to accept humiliation was the moment I discovered that the bond we had built over 25 years was stronger than gossip, stronger than pride, and stronger than blood itself.